Anyway, I've been long overdue doing a stream like this for about a couple weeks. If you're not familiar with the channel or my writing or my blog, I do quarterly blog posts where I write about every game that I play and finished during each quarter of the year. So we are currently in the last quarter of 2022, but the third quarter was from, let's see, from March, July, August, September. So this is every game that I managed to finish and roll credits on during uh, the months of July, August, and September. My goal is to write at least 2 to 3 paragraphs on each game, just kind of general thoughts or impressions, what I accomplished in the game. Some of it comes off as mini review sometimes, uh, or just kind of general opinion pieces, but it kind of keeps me focused and on track during the year. And ever since I've been doing this, there's actually a whole Discord community that tries to finish 52 games in a year. I've played and finished way more games, so it's more of like an organizational kind of keeps me from what's the word I'm looking for? Keeps me from it just keeps me on track, I guess. So what we do on these kind of streams is kind of like just chatting streams where I read through my blog posts that I've been working on, and I sort of correct any grammatical or spelling mistakes or anything that's kind of worded oddly as I read it out loud, and then I publish and share the post on my WordPress blog, and then I share it to Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So, without further ado, usually have some sort of introduction. So again, this was kind of the summer months, the kind of peak summer months of the year, the third quarter of the year. So I usually write a little bit about something. And then if you're actually reading the blog post, like on your phone or on a desktop, there is links to the previous quarters for this year. And I've been doing this for a couple years now. So there's a lot of information to catch up on if you're interested. So I'm not going to read the intro. It's kind of for the readers if you care to check that out. And at the time of writing this, I have completed my goal for the year. So my general goal, personal gaming goal, is to finish or roll credits on 52 games in a single year. So as of recording this, I have met that goal more or less. I'll probably spill into maybe 60 or so by the end of the year, depending on what I play and what I kind of make time for, what I have time for. So we'll see what the game of the year discussions will be like. But okay, so this was the 28th game I finished for 2022, and it was ElecHead. So I'm just going to read what I wrote. And oh, by the way, I also have like the music that I'm streaming in the background as sort of like background ambiance to the writing or to the reading. I don't know if it's more distracting or less distracting, or if it makes the just chatting sort of atmosphere better, but I don't know. Anyway, so ElecHead was the 28th game that I finished this year. It was developed by Nama Takahashi and Company. It is a masterclass in 2D puzzle platforming. I actually completed this game back on PC in 2021, and I gushed about it here. So again, if you're reading this, I actually wrote a decent amount about this game, and I made my top 10 list, I think, last year. So there's a link there if you're reading. But I decided 100% playthrough was in order for my revisit of the Nintendo Switch version, since I only rolled the initial credits on Steam. As far as I know, there's nothing exclusive to the Switch version of the game, but if you haven't played it before, there's never been a better time, especially if Switch is your indie platform of choice. So if you play PC games on your desktop, or if you have a Steam Deck now, or if Switch is still your preferred kind of portable platform, ElecHead is on both. So you kind of have no excuse now. ElecHead is filled with secret passages and collectibles that are extremely well hidden, especially if you're not using a guide. I felt compelled to find everything the game had to offer this time around, and even after scouring the map, which asks the player to hug most walls on each screen, I still came up short and had to resort to a guide to discover some of the more elusive secrets. With that said, 100%ing ElecHead only took me around 5 hours, and it's still some of the best 5 hours I've had in gaming, period. So, yeah, I'm not going to dwell. I've already written and streamed and talked about this game. But if you like 2D puzzle platformers, it's cheap. And it's one of the best games I've played over the past couple of years. So it's pretty easily available if you have any kind of modern gaming platform. The 29th game I finished was Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. Developed by Traveler's Tales, is a licensed 3D platformer that attempts to retell the story of Toy Story 2 through the lens of Super Mario 64. Before Traveler's Tales became a Lego making machine, they used to create games that were either original, even Call of the King being my favorite, or licensed like Toy Story 2. Most licensed games back in the day were not well received by critics or consumers alike. While this generally is the case for most licensed games from this era, it was mostly because they just weren't very good, or they felt like cash grabs that tied into their respective movie releases. Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, however, is a competent 3D platformer that's well worth your time, especially if you're a fan of the genre. Similar to Super Mario 64, each stage contains Pizza Planet tokens, which are essentially the power stars from SM64. These objectives range from collecting a certain amount of coins for Ham to finding pieces of Mr. Potato Head, or even fighting a boss character, most if not all of which are unique to the game. The level objectives can be tackled in any order, and while some ideas repeat throughout the game, there's always a slight twist on how you complete the objective. I was surprised with how open-ended the levels are, and while their size might feel small or confined by today's standards, the scale of these areas were relatively impressive for their time. The game mostly follows the scenes from the movie too, but it takes some liberties for obvious reasons. Completed the game at 100%. It took me somewhere between 7 or 10 hours. If you're looking for a good licensed game, Toy Story 2 has aged surprisingly well. Yeah, I love 3D platformers, and I'd like to think I've played all of the worthwhile ones, and I talk about this later as well in this blog post. So I've always heard pretty decent things about this game, but I didn't play it as a teenager or a kid when it originally came out. I kind of stayed away from licensed games, like outside of the main line, like first-party Nintendo platformers or Sega. I would always go to like the weird kind of third-party games first, and then like leave licensed games as like a last resort. Like if there's absolutely nothing left to play, then I would check it out. But this is on PlayStation Plus Premium now, and you can download it for free if you're subscribed. And it was really fun. Like I couldn't stop playing it until I got 100%. I was really surprised with it. And if you're not familiar with what they originally created, let me see. Let's do new. What can we do it here? The Haven, Fall of the King. So before they made like Lego games, Traveler's Tales. Just jump into this review. This is one of my favorite games on PS2. It's like probably really dated and ugly looking, but like before, that looks kind of offensive. Where's some like running around parts? So like before they became like basically what From Software is today in terms of like they just make Souls games. Traveler's Tales, before they started making a million Lego games, they made like this random, unique, original like action adventure game for PS2 and I think Xbox or GameCube. One of the versions was canceled. I was obsessed with it. One of those games that has like a million different types of gameplay styles in it. Like there's turret sections, you're flying around. There's like mini games everywhere. Kind of that time when platformers there's some like kind of traditional platforming, but it was just so weird, and I was like just so into it for whatever reason, because again I love the genre. That it was supposed to be a trilogy, I think, too, so there were planned sequels, but they never I got a chance to go beyond the initial game because it probably didn't sell very well. But if you're uh, for again like all these Lego whatever games that Traveler's Tales has been making, they made licensed stuff like there are other licensed platformers like Toy Story, which was I thought was great, which is what I just read about or shared. And then there was a game like this, like Haven Call of the King. So very cool 3D platformer kind of action adventure game. And the coolest thing about it was that like that there was kind of a seamless Jack and Daxter type of load times where you could, I think this is an example of it, you could fly from planet to planet and it was all seamless. Like there wasn't really any loading screens or anything. So you could like almost like a like a really early No Man's Sky sort of thing. It was really cool. Okay. Our game 30 of 2022 is Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. So developed by Falcom, is the latest entry in the long-running Ys franchise, and the follow-up to Ys 8, Lacrimosa, I think it's Dana or Dana. I just played this, finished this last year, or the Ys 8 rather, so I forget how they pronounce it. But Ys 9, for better or worse, still retains the party-based gameplay found in the more recent titles. If you played the previous entry, Ys 9 is essentially the same game, but instead of a tropical island, Adol and friends have found themselves in a prison town. Ys 9 has often been criticized for its somewhat bland look, and while a dreary fortress town isn't as appealing as a tropical island, the prison city isn't without its charm. From my recollection, Ys 9 is the first Ys game to recognize most of Adol's previous exploits and uses it as a focal point for the story, or in the story. Most Ys titles are treated as standalone adventures, with few references to previous games. In Ys 9, however, Falcom seems to have taken a bigger picture approach, almost treating the game as if it was one of their Legend of Heroes titles. This decision to make Ys more dialogue and story heavy hasn't sat well with the older fan base, however. Some fans prefer the older Ys games when it was just Adol on a solo adventure, more dungeon crawler focused than the party-based traditional RPG experience the series has been as of late. While I think for the structure of the older games, I don't dislike the current state of Ys either. If there's one aspect of Ys that remains true no matter the entry, it's how formulaic and tightly designed they are, almost to a fault. If you play these games thoroughly, equipping the latest gear, doing every side quest, etc., you really don't have to grind. If you're underleveled in an Ys game, a boss encounter will let you know. Combine this with the action-oriented combat and the recent introduction of perfect guards and dodges, or / dodges, Ys games deliver a consistently satisfying experience, and Ys 9 is no different. By the way, every picture on my blog that I upload or that I include in my writing or my blog post, for the most part, should be from my actual playthrough. So my process is sort of, as I'm playing the game, I take a few pictures. And since most modern platforms have in-game kind of photo modes, or the system UI has like a photo button, whether it's Xbox, Nintendo Switch, or PS4, PS5. I just use those. I upload them to Twitter. I pull them from Twitter, upload them to my blog, and then I try to not pull from other websites or kind of pull generic images that other gaming websites are already using for the games, or other the official uploads from the developers themselves, like on their website or whatever. I try to include pictures that I took specifically, just to make it a little bit more personalized and not so sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? You know what I mean. So I will say I've grown slightly tired of the rock, paper, scissors combat system and the party-based gameplay, which Falcom will be changing for the next entry. So again, if you're reading this, I do link to an article where they talk about Ys 10 and the changes they're making. So I completed Ys 9 on hard difficulty with all the side quests completed and nearly everything done and collected at around 50 hours. Falcom has been making games for nearly as long as I've been alive. Sometimes I wonder how much longer I have it in me to keep playing games, but as long as Falcom keeps creating classic RPGs like Ys, I'll keep going along for the ride. Similar to the previous games, there's new game plus options, harder difficulties, and boss rush modes to tackle if I wanted to. I wanted an excuse to revisit the game, but for now I'm happy to move on to other games while I wait patiently for Ease 10. So yeah, Ease. There was a game that I played for the first time in 2022 that didn't release this year. Let me rephrase that. If there was a game that there was a game, my favorite game that did not release this year that I played for the first time in 2022, it would be Ease 9, easily. There's a few other games I think from a few years back that I did manage to finish this year that would kind of like sit with it. But I've been playing Ease games since the first one. My introduction was PS2 Ease Arc of Napishtim, which was E6 technically, and it's not even like one of the better ports from my understanding, but I didn't know any better at the time, so I loved it. And I've played most, if not all of the, at least North American released mainline Ease entries since. So I'm pretty caught up with the series in terms of like at least playing through them once. So I'm ready for the 10th game. I can't wait. And Ease games are just so cozy and kind of like nostalgic for me, at least. They remind me of like the RPGs I grew up with on, you could argue, from Super Nintendo all the way through like the original PlayStation, so, or PS2. So they just hit the spot. So I'm glad they're still around. When I need to play an Ease game, they're always there. I'll just say that. All right, game 31, 2022 is Pocky and Rocky Reshrined. Actually, I don't think this game has a colon for the title, so we'll remove that to be more specific. I can't stand when that's a whole nother conversation. All right. Pocky and Rocky Reshrined, developed by Natsume, is a remake of an SNES cult classic. Pocky and Rocky is a challenging arcade-like experience, but at its core, it's an on-foot shooter or shoot 'em up or shmup. Never got the chance to play this game as a kid, so I had little to no expectations diving in. With that said, I'm simply a fan of retro games with tight gameplay, good music, and killer sprite work. Pocky and Rocky checks all of these boxes and then some. Outside of the rock solid gameplay, my favorite thing about the game are the visuals. The very first level, fall leaves litter the grounds of a shrine. As the player runs and dives over them, the leaves get kicked up behind you. Even your weapon knocks the leaves around. Extremely intoxicating to watch, and there's little details like this sprinkled throughout the stages. This picture right here is actually the stage I'm talking about. The background art is simply gorgeous, the boss animations are superb, and the game simply makes me want to be a kid again. Pocky Rocky is incredibly short, but it's meant to be replayed and mastered in higher difficulties. Fortunately, the game's checkpoints are fair, and there are unlimited continues. Some stages are broken up into sub-levels, and if you die halfway through the stage, you'll start at a midway checkpoint instead of the beginning of the stage. There's local co-op as well, but it must be unlocked by completing the game once in single player, or by earning enough coins from regular play, which is an odd decision given how difficult the game is. I remember that was a big complaint I saw people on Twitter saying like they just want to play co-op and they couldn't because they had to unlock it, which is kind of weird. I completed the game once on the default difficulty, but the trophy list asks you to complete the game with each unlockable character using only single credit, which isn't happening anytime soon. So that's a lot to ask. This game's tough. It's tough, but it's fair. A casual playthrough, it's pretty chill. The checkpoints are very lenient. But if you want to like master the game, you got to put some time in and put some practice in. But yeah, this game was a nice surprise. Oh man, I want to make this game, this remake, remaster, re-release my game of the year, honestly, but it shouldn't really count because they're older games. This is the game I was waiting for all year. The 32nd game that I finished was specifically Klonoa Door to Phantom Mile from the recently released Fantasy Reverie series. So Klonoa Door to Phantom Mile, developed by Bandai Namco, and this version specifically, I think, is Monkey Craft, from what I gathered or what I've researched. Is a 2D, 2.5D platformer that was originally released on the PlayStation. In Klonoa, you play as a dream traveling cat with floppy ears and a hat with an embroidered Pac-Man logo. Klonoa can run, jump, and flutter a short distance, similar to how Yoshi controls from Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Unique to Klonoa, however, is his ring that can be used to capture enemies. What was most interesting about Klonoa back in the day from a design perspective is that it made use of both the background and foreground. You could capture an enemy with your ring, use the enemy to double jump or toss it to a switch in the background or foreground, or at other objects to discover hidden items. That's kind of a mouthful. Like, I want to rewrite that sentence, but I also don't want to. You could capture an enemy with your ring, use the enemy to double jump, or toss it into a switch. In the, let's do this. Toss it into a switch, or at other objects in the background or foreground to discover hidden items. I'll leave it at that. This is why I do this kind of live, or I stream this, because it kind of helps me when I read it out loud. I can reword certain sentences or kind of edit on the fly, and hearing it out loud helps when you're writing. While a handful of games played around with the 2.5 perspective, we do 2.5D perspective. In the PS1 era, Tumba and Pandemonium come to mind, which I've played both of which use exclamation points or exclamation marks in their titles, by the way. I personally felt Klonoa did it best. I actually went back and edited this when I originally wrote it. It's Digital Foundry, if you're familiar with them. They're like kind of a tech-based analysis website, but they also do retrospective on certain game series, and they just did a series, a two-part series on Klonoa, and honestly, like, similar to how I feel about Tim Rogers and his reviews for Action Button and his Patreon and everything, between Digital Foundry and Tim Rogers' work, I don't know why I'm bothering streaming or writing or creating YouTube content, because they're like the bar for me, or like, to me, they're the threshold, like they're the standards to me in terms of like the kind of content I wish I could produce, or the kind of writing I wish I could do, the editing that goes into it, like that's what I wish I could do or had the time or energy or willingness to do. But yeah, if you're actually reading this, I linked to Digital Foundry's kind of retrospective on Klonoa, and I started watching it today actually, and it's really good. While the gameplay remains on a 2D plane, the paths twist and turn into and out of the background, and combined with the dynamic camera angles, it provides the feel of a lush 3D experience. Klonoa has an interesting legacy, some of which might come as a surprise to most people. Did you know, for example, that the director of Ninja Gaiden worked on Klonoa? Klonoa also had a sequel on the PS2 and a handful of portable releases, some of which never made it to the States. The series has been dormant since the failed Wii remake for the first game back in 2008, which I liked. Until recently, most fans thought Klonoa was long dead and buried. It's honestly a miracle this collection exists, and I hope it's sold well enough to warrant a true sequel. While the collection was rumored for quite some time, and the trademark would constantly get renewed, year after year, time would pass, and an official announcement would never come to fruition. Some say the new visuals lack the grittiness of the original, while I somewhat agree. There's a nice overall compromise here between the PS1 classics, or the PS1 classic and the Wii remake. Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series is the best of both worlds, and considering the eBay prices for the two games on their original platforms, platformers are actually platform. Consider yourself lucky that there's now a convenient way to experience these classics. Klonoa Door to Phantom Mile is arguably my favorite platformer of all time, and it was the first game to actually make me cry. While the game is relatively short, each stage offers unique platforming sequences, environmental puzzles, citizens to save, which are collectibles, and gems to collect. Underneath it all, the game is also building towards an unsuspecting emotional conclusion. When you reach the end of the game, the music becomes much more serious and the high stakes become clear. Ultimately, under Klonoa's lighthearted and colorful exterior lies a dark game with a truly depressing ending. I'm not going to spoil it, but I actually do kind of spoil some of it in this picture right here. But this is like a 20-plus-year-old game, so you still don't know the context of it unless you play it. Growing up with 2D platformers like Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong Country, and Sonic the Hedgehog, for example, Klonoa was the first one I played that actually made me feel some sort of emotional resonance. For that reason alone, I think it's special. I completed the game at 100%, but new to the Fantasy Reverie series is an unlockable hard difficulty, which I will revisit down the road. Buy and support Klonoa so it doesn't go dormant for another 10 plus years. I tried my best. I did also link on my about section on this channel is to my YouTube channel, which is essentially a stream archive or dump for anytime I stream here on Twitch. I did a full playthrough of both Klonoa and Ape Escape. The first Klonoa from this remake, and then the original Ape Escape that's now on PS4 and PS5. If you're interested and you want to hear kind of my in-the-moment thoughts as I revisited it, there's that. So the YouTube channel's on, linked straight from my main page here on Twitch. But yeah, this Klonoa is one of my favorite games of all time. I think it's one of the best platformers of all time. It's a shame that it's not as popular or as big as other game series. Hopefully it did well enough to get like a true sequel. I know Namco it's sort of hinted like if the game does well enough or if this collection does well enough, they'll consider, you know, more re-releases of like the portable games or like an actual third entry. So we'll see what happens. I got Stray. Game 33 of 2022 was Stray. Developed by Blue 12 Studio, is a game where you play as a cute cat in a post-apocalyptic world that's rooted in classic adventure game elements. When I'm drafting my Game of the Year list, I think about the games that made me put the controller down and reflect. Each year, I'm on the lookout for games that give me moments like this, and not only did Stray have them in spades. See the spoiler section below, sorry. Just checking something. The game has a built-in mechanic that lends itself to the very idea. In Stray, there are spots of the game where you can cuddle up into a ball and take a nap. The camera zooms out and the heads-up display disappears, giving the player a moment of respite to reflect on everything they've accomplished so far. Many games incorporate this, what I kind of put in quotes, cinematic resting technique, which is like a made-up term that I just gave it. But there's something about how it's utilized in Stray that really resonated with me. Perhaps because I love cats and envy their simple, carefree lifestyles, eating and sleeping whenever they want to, or maybe it's just because the relationship between the robots and the furry feline feels so comforting and genuine. It's clear the developers are cat lovers. So I have some endgame spoilers here, but it's kind of, I'll just read it now. So if you're afraid of spoilers, just kind of skip ahead a little bit. I'll try to do time stamps my YouTube upload potentially. So 3, 2, 1, Stray spoilers. One of my favorite things about games is when the developers know they've created a sense of place. At the end of Stray, it's revealed that the areas you've been exploring is actually a domed city sealed shut from the outside world. During the final gameplay sequence, you destroy a command center of sorts, and the ceiling above the city begins to open. If you look out from the big windows in this room, you can see the entirety of the city from above. Every area you explored is detailed and visible below, and it feels like you're looking at a miniature diorama set. The sense of scale is incredible, and as the metal plates retract, sunlight bathes the city below, and the game lets you quite literally soak in all of its glory. The entire sequence is in real time too, and you can watch. Ooh, this is redundant. You can watch this scene. I'm just gonna say the scene unfold in silence if you so choose. It was a Game of the Year moment for me, and months later I still think about how impactful the whole experience was. Alright, so end spoilers. The opening chapter Stray feels like a team eco game. That's how I thought, honestly. There's no dialogue outside of an opening title card sequence and a really stylistic alien robot looking font, establishing that you're outside of the city's walls. The further you progress, however, the game sort of shows its classic adventure game influence as it quickly devolves into a fetch quest of sorts with a lot of back and forth conversations with various NPC. I mostly enjoyed the narrative approach, but I do understand how some people could have been disappointed with how at times it doesn't really feel like you're a cat. The game's arguably from the perspective of a little should be of a little robot companion or familiar who accompanies you on your quest, which again could be disappointing to those who just wanted a game solely about our feline friends. That seemed to be debated after kind of the honeymoon phase was over for Stray. Was like people were like, I just wanted to like run around as a cat and not, you know, do tasks for robots. Like another interesting choice from a design perspective is the fact that developers chose third person instead of first person. A little robot friend who accompanies the kitty happens to be equipped with a flashlight so that the player can see in the dark. Cats, however, are known to have night vision, so it requires some suspension of disbelief while playing. That's something I didn't think about until I was listening to a recent podcast episode of Easy Allies, if you're familiar with them. They were sharing their thoughts on the game. Watching the cat jump through around the environment, how it interacts with the robot sells the game. However, it was probably the right choice. There was something else I couldn't stop thinking about while playing Stray, though. Cats have a free will, and unless they're trained, they're not known to taking directions from humans very well, at least from my experience. So the fact that the player is controlling an animal that would clearly have a mind of its own requires even further suspension of disbelief. But the same thing can be said about any person, animal, or creature we control in a video game. So it's best not to overthink things, I think, is the lesson here. I completed the game with all memories collected, and even every trophy outside of doing the speed run. Stray is easily one of the best games I've played all year. Yeah, Stray was like what I was expecting, but not what I was expecting, and the ending really did it for me. It's easily going to be in my top 10. As I mentioned earlier, I replayed Ape Escape. So this is game number 34. So Ape Escape, originally developed by Japan Studio, is a 3D platformer for the original PlayStation that was mostly known for its use of the DualShock controller. When the original Ape Escape launched for the PS1 back in 1999, it required Sony's DualShock controller in order to play. For those who may not remember a time before analog controls, DualShock allowed developers more freedom in both character control and camera movement applications. Ape Escape was one of the few games to take full advantage of the controller's capabilities. Players could make underhanded swings and with their net to capture monkeys, twirl a hula hoop, rotating the right analog stick to stun enemies, or even control an RC car to solve puzzles by utilizing both analog sticks. It was kind of a mouthful as well. It was kind of a big deal, and I wrote more about it here. So like if you're actually reading the blog post, I linked to when I originally wrote about Ape Escape, which was actually for when I wrote about Astrobot Rescue Mission back in 2018, which made my top 10. I think it was my game of the year from that year, or it was the second favorite game. I don't remember if that was the year Ace Combat 7 came out. But similar to Klonoa, not only is Ape Escape one of my favorite platformer series of all time, the series has been dormant for quite some time. The last mainline entry was Ape Escape 3, back on the PS2, but since the release of classic PlayStation games on the PS5, Ape Escape has finally returned. They roll the initial credits on Ape Escape, but there's an entire post-game where more monkeys get added to each level. There's also time trials where you can earn gold medals based on how quickly you capture each monkey in a stage. Getting 100% in Ape Escape takes quite the investment. While I completed the game to its fullest back in the day, I was simply happy to revisit one of my favorite games of all time, even if it wasn't to its full extent. Normally I probably wouldn't count this because I didn't really like see the real ending or the true ending, which kind of requires like a pretty big investment. And once I kind of finished it the first time, so again, I did full playthrough streams and they're recorded and uploaded on my YouTube channel of both the first Klonoa from the new collection and the first Ape Escape. So I was kind of feeling a little burned out when I finished the initial like kind of part of the game. But as you can see, like I uploaded my save file picture and it says 55%. So there's nearly like a full half of a game after you finish it the first time. So I still counted it though, because I was thinking I maybe would come back and either play it offline and 100% it further, and see the real ending again, or stream it like another, continue my series of my full playthrough of this game. But I haven't fully decided on that yet. We're gonna read Hell Pie, and then we're gonna take a short break. I'm gonna run an ad during the break, so not to cause any hiccups during the main streaming part. All right, so game 35 of 2022 is Hell Pie. Hell Pie, developed by Sluggerfly, is a disgustingly well-made 3D platformer made up of all of the best ingredients from the past. While Hell Pie does have a story, it's mostly a collectathon through and through. You play as an intern at Hell Inc., the official headquarters or workplace of the Damned. You're tasked to collect ingredients from 4 themed worlds so that you can bake the ultimate birthday present for dessert for Satan himself. To aid you on your quest, you're chained to a cute cherub friend who you can use as both as a grappling. Let me rewrite that. To aid you on your quest, you're chained to a cute cherub friend who you can use as both a grappling hook and a weapon. I think that's okay. The character movement, how it generally feels to control your character, is one of the most important aspects of a 3D platformer, and Hell Pie nails it. It's super satisfying to swing from one platform to the next, and one of the game's many collectibles can be used to upgrade your swing, which gives you even more control over your jumps. In fact, some may say that it feels a bit broken at times once you unlock certain skills. If you time your jumps well enough, you can bypass entire sections of particular stages with an upgraded swing. But perhaps that was the creator's intent. It didn't bother. I remember I did see some people make a comment on that, thinking that like the swing was a little overpowered. But you kind of have to like play pretty thoroughly to like unlock the full potential of the swing. So I think it's fairly balanced. Hell Pie's humor and tone can come off as somewhat offensive and juvenile within the first few hours. For one, the game is relatively gory. Cute-looking creatures get decapitated and fragged on a regular basis. Secondly, one of the first levels you explore is a sewer that's inhabited by literal pieces of shit and giant naked monsters that eat fecal matter. I'm not kidding. In another world, which happens to be a jungle, all of the fauna is phallic in design. The creatures that inhabit the woods are extremely horny, and they don't hide it either. The game's pretty gross, but it's also one of the best 3D platformers I've played in a long time. The sense of humor and tone might rub people the wrong way, and it kind of did to me, to be honest, at the start. But ultimately, I didn't find anything too offensive in it, and I don't think it crossed any kind of like seriously offensive lines. But I did, so I completed the game at 100% with the platinum trophy earned. One little side note on this game, kind of circle back to, games releasing with, glitches and bugs and that kind of thing. This game had a few weird glitches at launch, but they've since patched it, so I actually couldn't complete it at 100% until they released a patch. So the game should be in pretty good shape now, regardless of the platform. It's on PC, Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, I think. And I think another studio did the Switch port, and I heard that the developers weren't happy with the performance of it, so I think they're gonna circle around and fix that version of the game too. But I love the Switch and I love Nintendo, but like if there's a third-party game, especially if it's like a 3D, more kind of modern, more demanding game, I don't know why anyone, unless you only own a Switch, why you would buy the Switch port if you own another platform. Because usually they just don't perform well, and apparently this didn't live up to the standards of the original developer, to whoever handled the Switch version of this game. So just beware if you buy the Switch version, it might not be up to par with the other ones. But yeah, Hell Pie was a big surprise. I like kind of knew about it, but also wasn't really following it, and I kind of just took a swing at it, or kind of impulse purchased it. And I'm like, holy shit, this is like peak PS2 era 3D weird 3D platformer that like no one talks about. And it's like a one-off, unique, brand new IP. But just like, if you like platformers from like the PS2 era specifically, like you should probably play this. All right, so before we get to the 36th game that we finished, which is already spoiled, Bright Memory Infinite, we're gonna take a quick break, commercial break, and then we will be right back. We're back. I think we're like a little over halfway through reading through this stuff. Let me lower this a little bit. Kind of experimenting with the music as part of the background. All right, so the 36th game I finished in 2022 is Bright Memory Infinite, developed by Chinese-based FYQD Personal Studio. It's a first-person shooter that feels more like a character action game, a la Devil May Cry. Following the release of the original Bright Memory, a proof of concept, or I wrote demon of sorts. That should be demo. A demo of sorts that was originally released as a standalone episodic game. Bright Memory Infinite feels more refined and realized than the first outing. Developed primarily by a single person, Infinite shoots for the stars in terms of AAA blockbuster set pieces and production values, but it feels more rooted in its humble, independent beginnings. Infinite is a frenetic, fast-paced shooter at its core that at times feels like you're playing Titanfall 2. Its B-movie dialogue and campiness, however, quickly reminds the player what they're actually playing, for better or worse. There's a sequence towards the end of the game where you drive out of a mountain tunnel that's about to come down, as if it were a James Bond film. You eject out of your car and grapple hook onto a commercial airplane that's spiraling towards a black hole in the sky. It's ridiculous. This is something I wanted to do while I was talking about the games that I did happen to capture. So on my YouTube channel, which again you can access through the main page of my Twitch channel. Let me try to find. Here's me playing. I'll just mute myself. This is me playing, what the hell? Hellpie and Bright Memory Infinite. So I captured some footage, some initial impressions. This was back in, or I uploaded this in August, but yeah, this was not to jump back to Hellpie from earlier, but this was like the inside of like a giant kind of beached whale in the first world of the game. So I had kind of like a not Majora's Mask, Zelda Ocarina of Time. What's that that giant fish's name? That you go, it's like the third one of the dungeons and one of like the early dungeons in Zelda or Ocarina of Time. The name's kind of blanking on me, but it's similar to that. Like or it even goes far back as like Star Tropics, totally different kind of game. But in Star Tropics, you go inside of a whale. I feel like very few games do stuff like this, but the levels are pretty creative. And the idea here was like, it was a sushi bar, so I think their message was like, had to do with, I think, whaling, like in real life. So, like, there were these snail creatures cutting up the inside of this whale, and they were serving, like, you know, the flesh or like the meat of this whale to like other creatures in this game's world. Like, there was like a dining hall inside of here. It was really weird, but all right. Let me try to find that thing in Bright Memory. I feel like I captured it, but I could be wrong. No, I didn't capture it. I think I tweeted about it, but yeah, there's this ridiculous sequence where you're like driving through a tunnel and your car hits a ramp You eject and parachute out of it, and use your grappling hook to like catch a ride on a plane that's like spiraling into this like black hole. It's so ridiculous. But yeah, Bright Memory is cool. It's really short. I think I'll talk about it more soon. Like super high production and incredible visuals for a game that was, I think, mostly made by one person. So it's pretty wild. Okay, so Bright Memory, both its original release and Infinite, also reminded me of old school light gun arcade shooters like Time Crisis or The House of the Dead, and for that reason alone, I dig it. The game is incredibly short and it can be beaten in a single sitting. There are multiple difficulty levels and New Game Plus options if you want to max your character out and collect everything, but as a whole, there's maybe 5 to 6 hours of content here. Bright Memory Infinite is incredibly ambitious and inspiring considering it's mostly a one-man project, so I hope the developer continues to make games going forward. I completed the game at 100% with the Platinum Trophy earned, so it was about like 5 or 6 hours to do everything. And I really enjoyed it. I really like these two games so far. I too. Game 37 of 2022 that I finished was the Tasmanian Tiger 2 Bush Rescue HD, which is like a mouthful. Developed by Chrome Studios, I believe still. It's a remaster of the original game that released back in the early 2000s. I haven't played this game since I was a teenager, and after revisiting it in 2022, I came away with a different perspective and a newfound appreciation for it. Tai at its core is a 3D platformer from the PS2 mascot era. It feels more in line with Banjo-Kazooie at times, right down to the music jingle that plays when you collect one of the game's many collectibles. Tai 2 feels like the type of sequel where the back of the box would have read bigger baddies, bigger areas, more collectibles, more attitude, more everything. It also mirrors its contemporaries by employing a semi-open world filled with minigames and kart racing, just like Jak 2, 3, and the latter two Sly Cooper games. While Tai 2 offers much more variety in terms of gameplay, it shines most during the traditional explorable spaces that feel more reminiscent of the levels found in the first game. The Tai 2 had the kind of like Jak 2 sequel-itis where like you went from having a traditional like fun 3D platformer that kind of didn't stray too far from the formula to having like every single gameplay minigame variety type that you could do from that period. So like kart racing, like wrangling alligators into nets, and like putting out oil drum fires with like a helicopter. Like it's just ridiculous. Speaking of which, so if there's one new takeaway I had revisiting this game as an adult, it was probably the almost educational angle the story leans towards. During multiple sequences in the game, you'll control a water blasting robot, and even the helicopter I kind of mentioned, where you're tasked to put out huge fires. The game's subtitle is Bush Rescue, which can arguably be interpreted as one who saves the Australian outback from bushfires, maybe. The game's story goes off the rail towards the end, and it unfortunately, let me get rid of that. It seems like repetitive. Goes off the rail towards the end, and it unfortunately becomes a Saturday morning cartoon more than anything else. However, I completed the game at 100%. For the first time this year, and I really enjoyed my trip down memory lane. I hope Tai the Tasmanian Tiger 3 Night of the Quinkin makes its way to consoles next, as it's the game I have the least amount of familiarity with in the series. Yeah, I actually I thought I was gonna. I really like the first Tai. It's kind of like a super simple kind of copycat Banjo-Kazooie style 3D platformer, and it's very. I mean, they're Australian developers, so like a lot of the all of the characters have like an Australian accent, or at least my understanding is I would think that the actors and actresses are from Australia. But even like the lingo and the terminology is all like very Australian, which I'm not super familiar with. I didn't grow up there. I've never been there. But it's an interesting series that's kind of I don't understand what happened to Thai or like where it's at currently, but I guess the original developers are still around and they're remastering or re-releasing the series over the past few years. Steam has all of them available, but well, the consoles only have the first two so far in terms of the HD re-releases. But yeah, again, if you're a big 3D platformer fan, just check out the Thai games. They're cool. Time on Frog Island, which is game 38 of 2022. Time on Frog Island, developed by Half Past Yellow, I believe, is an adventure game of sorts where you play as a shipwrecked sailor on an island filled with frog-like people. Time on Frog Island might look like another Animal Crossing type of game from afar, but it's actually more in line with traditional point-and-click PC-style adventure games. There's no dialogue. Um, there's no dialogue in Time on Frog Island, and everything is communicated through environmental storytelling or emojis. At the start of the game, it's clear that you have to collect certain items in order to repair your ship. By solving the requests of the islanders, your character slowly uncovers the pieces that are needed in order to rebuild your ship. Time on Frog Island, at times, which is really redundant sounding, feels more like a glorified item trading game. It's as if someone took the item trading quests from numerous Zelda games and made an entire game out of it. The majority of your time spent on this island is finding an item and bringing it back to someone. To make matters a bit more tricky, there's a day-night cycle, weather effects, and NPC routines. You can complete the game relatively quickly, but if you want to uncover all of the secrets and fulfill every request on the island, you're probably looking at 10 plus hours of gameplay if you take good mental notes. I completed the game with what was presumably the best ending it saw nearly everything the island has had to offer, outside of some elusive trophies or achievements that might take a new playthrough to earn. Time on Frog Island's story was surprisingly heartwarming too. Brief artwork vignettes are shown in between gameplay sessions when you go to sleep, and it's just enough motivation to see how or why your little sailor friend has to get off this island. Time on Frog Island was surprisingly delightful and highly recommended if you're looking for a relaxing, thoughtful experience. So yeah, this game's not probably what most people thought it was going to be. I streamed a little bit of it. Let me just go back to my... Again, if you want to go to my channel, it's Unexpected Games on YouTube, and there's a link on the main page of my Twitch channel. Yeah, this was part of my stream of this game a little ways back. Kind of early summer days. Yeah, I don't know what people thought this game was going to be. I don't know what the developers has done before. But it's not... I think people thought it was going to be like kind of like an Animal Crossing sort of game, but it's not at all. It's literally like a fetch quest with a day and night cycle, and it's very minimalistic, very like kind of not handholdy, like super non-linear, very kind of like pause and react sort of gameplay. So like there's these little mushroom pads scattered in the environment, and I forget what you have to do, but like if you bring a certain item that you can pick up somewhere to these little like mushroom pads, they kind of create these like bouncy little platforms for you, and then some of them let you access certain areas of the island that you couldn't before, like things like that. So it's not like Metroid in a sense, but like the way the island unfolds is a little Metroidy. But it just like you can finish it like in a sitting, so it was really kind of in one ear out the other. And it's a shame because like on stream I was like, oh, I'm not sure I'm feeling this, but then when I played it offline, because if you're not familiar with my channel, I don't really do full playthroughs intentionally, except for that Ape Escape and Clonoa one. Um, but when I was playing this game offline, not streaming it, I'm like, holy shit, I really like this. So like, I didn't really get to capture the moments when I was like actually into it outside of the initial stream. So there's that. Okay, let's move on. Game 39 is Destroy All Humans, the PS2 version specifically. Developed by originally by Pandemic Games, is a third-person shooter, action-oriented game of sorts, where he plays an alien who sounds like Jack Nicholson, whose orders are to invade Earth, extract human DNA, and find a missing spacecraft. Destroy All Humans is filled with social commentary, some of which is still relevant today, but it feels rooted in old B movies about extraterrestrials. It's like Mars Attacks, but with a slightly different sense of humor. The writing seems to take a middle ground, sort of all sides are wrong approach in favor of the alien species that wants to simply destroy all humans, as the name suggests. After these past few years, I would honestly accept an alien invasion at this point, given the pandemic we're still living through, the threat of nuclear war, and the social political unrest that continues to stew. Our climate has and continues to change on Earth, and NASA just developed a rocket that can ricochet planet-destroying asteroids. So it looks like us humans will have to do the honor, and it's fast approaching. It seems, not to get all doom and gloomy, but like while I was playing this game, that's like all I was thinking about was like, just like fuck everything. Um, Destroy All Humans existed in a post Grand Theft Auto 3 world that its age clearly shows. It's a semi-open world game with waypoints, optional missions, citizens who walk around aimlessly with no real purpose, a crime meter for when you cause too much havoc, and collectibles galore. For whatever reason, I felt compelled to complete the game at 100% and obtain the platinum trophy. Like all PS2 games on PS4, PSN Classics come equipped with new sets of trophies for the player to earn. Surprisingly, despite being able to earn the in-game 100% completion by the end of the game, you can miss some of the trophies during a playthrough if you're not careful. This is very like nitty-gritty, but I felt compelled to like write about it. I had to do a quick replay of the main game where I had to scan or disguise myself as a certain amount of unique NPCs throughout the course of the game, which is one of the game's core gameplay mechanics. A remake of Destroy All Humans now exists on PS4 and PS5 too, and while the visuals do look impressive, it is probably the version I should have played. I wanted to see what the original game had to offer. I spent nearly 30. This is a beefy game too, if you want 100% it. I spent nearly 30 hours playing this game, which is far more time than I wanted to spend with it. So I will give the remake and the sequel a spin around the sun some other day down the road, if the Earth is still standing by. I tried to get a little bit more clever with my writing for this game. It's like, what the fuck am I gonna say about? It's like a kind of like brainless, pun intended maybe there, because you do extract people's brains in this game. It's just like a brainless kind of GTA clone to some degree. Only you play as an alien that like, you know, has invaded Earth, and you're just causing a bunch of havoc, and it's very heavy on the social commentary too. Even for its time, it was. So I'm curious if the remake kind of rewrote or kind of tried to keep it like modern in terms of like the things that are going on in the world right now, but like for its time, it seemed to be very like I don't know if the developers are left leaning or if they're kind of like a middle ground. I couldn't pick up on like what they were really trying to say, because it's kind of just seemed like fuck everything, almost like I think like Matt Stone and Trey Parker are with like South Park, and how the social commentary they do for that show is kind of just like everyone sucks. I don't know. This is a funny game. I'm just gonna let it sit on this for a second and make anyone who's watching this wonder why I played an Ice Age game. So the 40th game I finished for 2022 was Ice Age Scrat's Nutty Adventure. uh, Developed by... Hey, Gemini! How are you? It's been a little bit. I also haven't been streaming very often, so. And I do give every game a fair chance. I'd like to think I do. So Ice Age, developed by Just Add Water, who is one of the developers that works on Oddworld games or Abe's Odyssey games. It's really weird how they got involved with this. It's a licensed 3D platformer based on the animated movies by Blue Sky Studios. You know, for the longest time, I thought Ice Age was DreamWorks. Um, I thought it was. I knew Ice Age wasn't Disney. That's the idea, so I'm glad I'm unexpectedly showing up. I thought Ice Age was Disney or DreamWorks, but it never was. I've never seen any of these movies. But like it's what the fuck's Blue Sky Studio? I guess they're just an animation studio. So from my understanding, it's an original story centered around Scrat, who, from my understanding, oh wow, that's double from my understanding. This is why I read this out loud. Yeah, I thought it was Dream. When I was looking this up, I'm like, this is. I wanted to. When I was writing about this game, I'm like, this is Ice Age is like from DreamWorks Interactive or blah blah blah. And then I, wanted to do my due diligence and research it just to make sure. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, this is not related to any of those studios. I swear to God, it was DreamWorks. Hold on, I got to rewrite this. So, from my understanding, it's an original story centered around Scrat. Get rid of that. So, who is a saber-toothed squirrel, which I also didn't realize, who simply loves acorns? Oh, interesting, Gemini. Okay. While scouring the lands for food, Scrat stumbles upon a ruin where his ancestors speak to him about the existence of legendary acorns. Naturally, you set off on an adventure to procure these ancient artifacts. I'm not exactly sure what drove me to play this game, let alone acquire the Platinum Trophy for it. After watching Kyle Bossman's charity stream, where he played nothing but early to mid 2000s licensed movie platformers, I just couldn't resist the allure of an animated film game. Fortunately, being a PlayStation Plus Premium member, the game was free to download with my subscription. I love 3D platformers. They are my bread and butter. Sometimes I need to play brainless, inoffensive, average games just to ground myself. It doesn't help that I've played nearly every worthwhile 3D platformer I like to think I have. And I kind of like threaten the reader. I say, go on, I dare you to name something I haven't played. If there's a 3D platformer that you think I haven't played, mention it or let me know. I'm going to do the classic YouTube thing, like, let me know in the comments if there's a 3D platformer I haven't played and I'll check it out. It was a former 20th Century Fox animation division, it seems. Okay, so I wasn't too far off. With all these companies that merge and merge together or whatever, played a lot. So Scrat's Nutty Adventure feels like a fan-made game that uses default Unreal Engine assets for its environments. The levels are long and overstay their welcome. Platforming is frustrating. This is like probably the harshest I've ever been about a game. Platforming is frustrating and the controls are stiff. Levels consist of moving platforms or switches you need to activate. Although you do obtain some Metroid-like abilities at the end of each world, which allows you to explore previously unreachable areas, which was cool. While it could be a kid's first game, in what world would anyone recommend this game over any Super Mario game, for example? I do like the hub area where the game begins. However, each collectible gets displayed on the walls here and gives the player a nice sense of progression. So that's what this picture is for my playthrough. So all of the game's collectibles are like kind of placed in this hub. That's like the center of the game. So that was cool. At the end of the day, it's just not a very good game. It's one that I find hard to recommend unless you're a 3D platformer aficionado like myself and have nothing else to play. Yeah, like it's I've reached a point where, because earlier in this stream, I did play, if I scroll back up, I played through Toy Story 2. I played like 2 licensed games this year, which is unusual for me. But that's where I'm at with 3D platformers. Like I've played even the new ones that have come out, like the new indie games, 3D platformers. Like I've played like a lot of them this year and finished them. So I'm like, I need like, what the fuck else is there in this genre? So I played through Toy Story 2, and it was awesome. So I'm like, you know what? I think I've been missing out on licensed platformers. And if you're not familiar with, let me go back to it. These former game trailers. Hey, thanks, Jeremy. I've been tagging my thanks for the resub, Sound Snake. I've been tagging analysis in my my streams just because, like, well, this especially is like these writing blogs that I do have been, you know, I've described my writing as if like almost just like a chronicle of like what I accomplished in the games that I've been playing, which isn't really probably super interesting from like a reader's perspective, but also they're like half opinion pieces, half like retrospectives, and then like a quarter like mini reviews. I don't know how to describe my writing. But yeah, like let me go back, let me go find his charity stream really quick. If you're not familiar with, I don't know if anyone's a fan of Kyle Bossman, but he's former game trailers, and then he went to Easy Allies, and now he does a bunch of freelance work, from my understanding. Has worked with Jeff Keighley before, but like he did a charity stream a couple months ago where he was playing nothing but licensed 3D platformers from like the early 2000s animated movies. So I was watching his stream, and I'm like, holy shit! Surprisingly, some of these games were like really fun, or they looked fun, or he was enjoying them. So I'm like, you know what? I've kind of hit the point where like I've played like all the worthwhile shit. So why not check out some of these games? Oh, that game looked horrible though. Oh, this is the funniest game. Like this Barnyard game looks really cool actually. If I could nominate a game of the year, well, I already kind of gave this to Ease 9 earlier, this award to Ease 9. Yeah, go watch. If you I don't know, again, I don't know if you like vibe with or like Kyle Bossman, but his charity stream for 2000s animated movie games was like super funny and fun to watch. And he kind of shed like a really kind of surprising light on these, like, you know, DreamWorks Disney games. And Barnyard was like, it's actually pretty fucking cool. But yeah, if I could give Wave Race 64 my game of the year for 2022, I probably would, but I can't do it. So the 41st game I finished this year was Wave Race 64, developed by Nintendo. As far as I know, I don't know what internally back then on N64, like, you know, they have like their subdivisions and their new teams today, but Wave Race 64 is a jet ski racing game that was originally released on the Nintendo 64. It's arguably one of my favorite racing games of all time, if not favorite. I played it to death back in the day, but since it was just re-released on the Nintendo Switch Online NSO, a replay of the entire game was long overdue. It blows my mind that no other developer has captured the feel of this game since. The controls are simple yet nuanced. The soundtrack is catchy and memorable, and the water physics are unmatched and have aged beautifully. I wish I wrote more about this game. This is really weird because I can write forever about a lot of things, or I can kind of just, you know, drone on about certain games. But I had like a lot of trouble writing about Wave Race 64 for some reason. Oh, I think my stream's crapping out. Okay, it's back. I think it's back. Crashing over waves, pulling off unnecessary stunts, listening to the overly excited announcer. There's just nothing else like it. Perhaps you had to be there back in 1996 to truly appreciate everything the game had to offer. Uh, but after all of these years, I still find myself wanting to return to the water and not the pavement. I think it's like my favorite line. It's like a little, I don't know if it's like a good line or not, but like, perhaps you had to be there back in 1996 to truly appreciate everything the game had to offer. But after all of these years, I still find myself wanting to return to the water and not the pavement. Like, there's so few like water-based racing games. Like, there's Jet Moto on PlayStation. There were few on like the PS2 Xbox era. Yeah, the water is like, you just want to drink it. I made sure to complete the game on every circuit, including Expert and Reverse, which were extremely challenging. I placed first in overall, and I also unlocked the Dolphin. So Wave Race 64 is quite frankly a masterpiece. So yeah, like I was saying, like I could normally write a long. Maybe I was just burned out by the time I got to like writing about this game. But it's so good. Maybe I just don't have anything else to say about it without going into like the nitty gritty of like why it's so great. But like, I kind of what I wrote is like how I feel about it. Like there's been no racing game, or at least water based. Especially like, when was the last jet ski game that came out? I think it was on like PS2 or Xbox. I mean, there's Hydro Thunder, which are like kind of high speed boat racing games. But there hasn't been anything like this. Okay, we're almost at the end. I think we're kind of getting there. Frog Gun or Frog Gun. I was really disappointed with this one, sadly. Developed by Mulgado, it's a 3D precision platformer with a PS1 style aesthetic. The visual style is reminiscent of Mega Man Legends, and the overall look of the game is very pleasing to the eyes, especially for a particular generation of gamers. Me, I wrote. Frogun's levels are grid tile based, but you have the full 3D control of your character. Your weapon, a frog gun, can be used to either grab enemies and use them as projectiles, or use it as a grappling hook to traverse stages. That's kind of like a run-on. That sounds really... I could write that. I could reword that, I think. Prior to some recent updates, Frog Gun becomes frustratingly difficult the further you progress, especially if you're trying to collect everything in a level. Similarly to how I felt about Demon Turf, another 3D platformer that I wrote about, which also released this year. Frogun's level designs felt more... That should be Frogun's level design felt more like fan-made stages from a level editor. This is really harsh for me to say this, but this is how I felt about Demon Turf. From a level editor than something handcrafted with a vision. Although the game has a world map of sorts, there's really no sense of place. Each level feels like it's a custom-made obstacle course that's suspended in the air, which is like my biggest pet peeve when it comes to platformers. I love Mario 64, but most of the levels in Super Mario 64 are kind of like suspended obstacle courses in air, especially like later on. Think about like the it's like the last world in the game. I forget what it's called, but it's like a floating island with the rainbow. Like it's literally just like a bunch of pieces floating in the sky. Whereas like something like Banjo-Kazooie or Jak and Daxter, it's like a very realized, grounded, cohesive world that has like a sense of place. And I prefer that over like, here's just a bunch of platforms and ideas that are just like thrown into like the air, and like here's how you get through. I don't know. So it's likely to the designer's choice, but it's an approach that doesn't vibe with me as much as other more traditional 3D platformers that have more realized or grounded explorable spaces. And then I kind of say see Hell Pie above. So like what I wrote about with Hell Pie. Like Hell Pie is more what I'm looking for with a 3D platformer, whereas Frogun is like, it's a different kind of platformer, but... So initially, any items you collected weren't saved until you hit a checkpoint, which has since been updated. I bought the game at launch and was happily 100%ing each level before moving on. but it became way too challenging towards the latter half of the game. When you are grappling from object to object midair, the auto lock on targeting just doesn't feel right and almost always results in an untimely death. I ended up completing the game at 72% and finished one of the unlockable boss rush modes in the post game. There are a ton of gallery images and hats to purchase. Finding mistakes, that's good. Which will take some time to grind out too. The story and characters aren't very interesting either, although the game insists on providing collectible scrolls with background story and the occasional dialogue sequence. You even have a rival who races you during particular stages, which are probably the most difficult levels to master. I really wanted to like Frogun or Frogagun more than I ultimately did. So yeah, I kind of not like super happy with what I wrote about for this game, but like I don't know. I just, again, the obstacle course kind of like, I did record this because I did stream this initially. Did you see what I mean? Like the levels are kind of like, that was the end of the level. I don't dislike it, but it's just not the kind of platformer that I typically like. And honestly, it's a much better game if you're playing it casually. I haven't gone back to it since they've updated it, but like before the patches, trying to collect everything in the level, it was like a nightmare. So like the background art kind of gives like a sense of a place to a degree, but see how it's just kind of like suspended platformers kind of like in a void, or platforms in a void. It's a style, I don't know what you call that, but like I just call it obstacle courses. And it feels just like a level editor. Like there's themed levels, like there's like cave levels, there's like a lava levels later on, then like there's some snow levels, but there's no like the game introduces enemies, like new types of enemies over the course of the game, but like it's so hard to put into words what I'm trying to say about this game. Like none of the levels have like a unique idea. It just feels like someone who was coming up with like hazards and obstacles like as they were designing, and like that was, and then when they got sick of like making the level, they decided like that was the end of the stage. Like I don't know, like I'm very like particular about platformers, and maybe I'm just, obviously I don't know how the developer, you know, I'm just like armchair kind of analyzing it, but like, you know, compared to Klonoa or something, I mean, that's a 2D platformer, but I don't know. But Demon Turf has the same problem. So both Demon Turf and Frog Gun, which both released this year, I think, yeah, Demon Turf was this year, or was it late last year? They have this kind of, no, it's not like a problem, but they take the approach that I don't like as much as say something, you know, like Banjo Kazooie or Jack and Daxter, or the first Sly Cooper even, or I don't know, or Hellpie even. Hellpie came out this year, and it's totally the kind of platformer that I like. This is probably a speedrunner's dream though. Like this game would be fun to watch at SGDQ. All right, let's move on. Oh god, Elden Ring. I have super complicated feelings about this game. This is the 43rd game that I finished this year. This is gonna this is gonna be a while to read through. The thing about these streams is that like I get so tired reading through them, and I'm always thinking like, why am I doing this? I guess, I mean, if some of you are in here listening to this, I guess like some people like it, but I always have so much anxiety before I do these blog streams, because like I'm reading all of my writing out loud live, but um, sometimes this is just like a ramble at this point. So Elden Ring, developed by From Software, is the latest and most ambitious Souls entry to date. It also feels like a culmination of everything From Software has been working towards since the 90s. As of late, I've had a love-hate experience. Ooh, that should be relationship. Why did I write experience? With their games. From Software is a developer that is near and dear to my heart. I have fond memories of bringing our original PlayStation to the shore so that my brother and I could play Kingsfield 2 late at night after coming back from the boardwalk. We bought a PS2 for Eternal Ring and Evergrace, From Software's not so popular PS2 launch games. We would later import Shadow Tower Abyss, the Japanese-only sequel to Shadow Tower on the PS1, so that we could utilize a fan-made translation on a modded PS2 and experience it in all of its obscurity. Prior to Demons and Dark Souls, From Software used to be known for a variety of games across multiple genres. During the PS2, should be GameCube, that says GX, Xbox era, for example, we were graced with games like The Adventures of Cookie and Cream, Lost Kingdoms, and Otogi. Today, From Software is a souls-pumping machine, and outside of a few experimental projects, see Deracine, and I think that's how you pronounce it, which I haven't played yet, and I really need to. And Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice to a lesser extent. From Software isn't the company they used to be, and for most of the community and industry at large, it appears to be for the better. I feel like I'm the outlier. Maybe me and my brother and some other people that I know. But I really wanted to include, because I have like a really old, long history with From Software. Like, I don't want to go on a rant with this, but like, and I don't want to gatekeep, because gatekeeping is the last thing I want to do. But it seems like if you watch any like big time YouTubers or gaming journalists and websites, like anytime anyone ever talks about From Software, it's like anything prior to even Dark Souls, like Demon Souls feels like it doesn't even exist to people. But like it seems like only people know From Software like post Dark Souls, and I understand why, and it makes sense. But like they have like such a storied, long history. They've been around since like early 90s as far as I know. Kingsfield and Armored Core originally were like early 90s games, and they've been making Elden Ring or Souls like kind of games since Kingsfield. Kingsfield was essentially like a first person Souls game before Souls became a brand. So I mean, they're arguably their games, even for their time, weren't super approachable, and they never would review well, and no one liked their games critically. So if there were fans of, like, I used to, on GameFAQs.com, the very first message board I joined was for Evergrace for PS2, and it was maybe like 20 people in there around like the first year or two that like stumbled their way into it and were like, this is kind of weird and cool, even though Evergrace is like arguably like a bad game. But like, my point is, like, From Software has a huge history, and I kind of grew up with them, not in the sense that, like, I mean, NES was the first system that I had, but like, PS1 and PS2 were like super formative for me. So like playing Kingsfield as a kid was like, had a pretty big impact on me. So I think it's important to discuss their legacy, even if like most people forget about it. And maybe if their older games aren't as good as their current games, but still, it's like important to talk about. So the most impressive thing about Elden Ring is probably its open world and how it differs from its contemporaries. Elden Ring is essentially From Software's take on Elder Scrolls, more so than, say, Nintendo's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, or Guerrilla's Horizon series, which everyone can't resist making comparisons to. There are what the game considers legacy dungeons, which are essentially the size of the main areas from Demon Souls, for example, but they're integrated or placed within a much larger overworld filled with its own smaller areas, tombs, ruins, encampments, and other eye-catching landmarks. With that said, the first 30 to 50 hours or so, the developers do a good job of disguising the repeated ideas and concepts. There are these four-legged stone monuments that stomp across the land in various spots, for example. It's an incredible moment the first time you witness these monstrosities, but once you see the sixth or seventh one of these, the honeymoon phase quickly comes to an end, and then there's only pain and suffering. Elden Ring may be more approachable than some of the other games in the series. If you get lost in one area or if you're struggling at a particular boss, you have many more options in terms of finding something else to do. At some point, you have to defeat some of the main bosses in order to proceed, and like any other Souls games, it's not easy. So I completed the game at level 147 with nearly 110 hours logged. I uncovered most of the map and beat all of the secret bosses that netted trophies at least. I did as many where I lost my I did as many side quests as I could, and I did not resort to a guide until I reached the end of the game, just to see what I could mop up before attempting the final boss. Unlike previous Souls entries, I found myself completely exhausted or defeated by certain boss encounters towards the end of the game. Typically, I prefer to solo Souls games before summoning online players for help. The Godskin duo is what broke me, however. Summoning allies is part of the game's experience and core gameplay mechanics, so I didn't think much of it, despite what some purists might say. God, there's some, like any part of the internet, go to some, hardcore Souls corners of the internet, and if you, use, either the in-game NPCs or the spirits you can summon to help you with a boss fight, or if you summon, an online player, you're not, a good player, which is, bullshit. But I think I'm just too old for this shit. I played a mostly dex strength-based character throughout most of the game, too. But by the 75+ hour mark, I started to invest in faith so that I could use some of the dragon incantations. I earned the Elden Lord ending and nearly met all of the conditions for one of the secret endings. I really like Elden Ring, but I'm ready for something a bit more different than just open world Dark Souls. Yeah, I'm super conflicted on this game. On it, I'm the end of the year discussions for all these websites and gaming sites that do game. I love game of the year discussions, but honestly, it's good. It's not even a hard thing to predict. The game of the year discussions are going to be, monopolized by Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. It's going to be between those two, and it's going to be exhausting. And I get it. I mean, again, I haven't played this new God of War game yet, obviously, because it's not out. And I think Elden Ring's incredible, just from a scope and design perspective. But it really is just a bigger Dark Souls game. And as someone who's grown up with the developer when they used to make a ton of weird, smaller games, Adventures of Cookie and Cream is this split screen, super cute, colorful, top-down puzzle platformer where you control both characters with one controller's analog sticks, on PS2. They just used to make really interesting games, and they had tons of different IP prior to Souls, and again, kind of circle this back to, let's go all the way back to Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2 is developed by Traveler's Tales. As I mentioned earlier, if you were in here earlier, Traveler's Tales are now known for making 1 million Lego games. So they're like a Lego pumping machine. So to me, Traveler's Tales, earlier I mentioned they made some original games like Haven Call of the King, which I really liked, and I talked about it earlier. But they used to make original, unique IP and games that weren't licensed games or that weren't Lego games. But Traveler's Tales, it's all Lego all the time. From Software, it's all Souls all the time. So I'm you could just say, this is a funny conclusion, but you could say the way I feel about Traveler's Tales and my time spent with Toy Story 2 is exactly how I felt about From Software and my time spent with Elden Ring. So that's my takeaway from this year. My major takeaway. Okay. But yeah, I'm already tired of hearing the future discussions about this game and God of War Ragnarok, which one's the best game of the year. So I'll just leave it at that. We're almost done. I'm so tired of talking. All right, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan was the 44th game I finished. for 2022 from the Cowabunga collection, developed by Konami originally. Digital Eclipse did the collection. It's the first TMT game for Game Boy. I never played this game as a kid, but I managed to finish it without using save states or rewind, which again is something I don't want to gatekeep, but like I would never gatekeep something like this. But I personally prefer to play old school, like retro, kind of one sitting games that don't have password systems or save files or anything, kind of how they were intended to be played. So like on their original hardware. So you had to play through this game on Game Boy in a sitting without stopping, you know, for the time when it came out. So I typically like to approach older games like that still if I can, unless they're like super frustrating. I feel like I just get more out of the game personally if I kind of meet it on its terms originally. So it's more fair than Castlevania The Adventure, at least I wrote, which is like an impossible portable Castlevania game. There are 5 stages and you can play any level out of order. The levels are extremely linear with enemies pouring out of both sides of the screen. The levels themselves aren't very interesting structurally. Considering it was originally a Game Boy game, I wasn't expecting much. You're constantly moving forward in the levels, and outside of a few stage hazards, like falling rocks and giant tires, there's not a whole lot of variety. The hit detection is rather lenient, however, and the stages don't overstay their welcome. You choose your turtle before playing the stage, and if you die, the turtle gets captured, and you need to pick another one. You essentially have 4 lives. So this is like a 4 live game. Enemies do drop pizza frequently to restore health, but there are also hidden areas to gain health back, although they're really well hidden, and I never found one on my first playthrough. Speaking of which, Digital Eclipse did an amazing job with the collection, as there are in-game tip pages which look like illustrated manual pages from their respective platform. The information in these menus are super helpful, especially if you're looking for some assistance, and you don't have to go online and look at game facts. Speaking of game facts, game FAQs rather. I finished the game in less than an hour, and I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of the collection soon. Yeah, these were, if you're kind of curious, like finishing 52 games in a year is a pretty tall order, especially if you have, you know, I have a full-time job, some sort of social life, I guess, in a relationship, you know, just regular day-to-day life kind of shit. But I don't, if you're wondering how someone can finish 52 games in a year, I don't watch like any TV really, unless I'm with someone that wants to watch something. So I'm like super behind on TV shows. I will go to the movies actually pretty frequently, but at this point I rarely even watch movies from home. So like I've been like, you know, post pandemic even after being vaccinated, like I finally started going back to the theater, not on like super crowded like, you know, release nights of certain movies, but like usually when the movie's about to like leave the theaters when I go see a movie. But like I don't watch a whole lot of TV. Movies I'm pretty selective about at this point. So like honestly, you know, outside of like survival day-to-day shit or like, you know, work and life crap, I'm playing games constantly. So and I'm playing games and I'm writing about games. So that's part of the reason why I usually meet my goal for these past few years. And the second reason is games like this. This is, you can finish this game in like an hour. So I don't want to call like purposely playing shorter games as kind of like a way to pad your completion rate for a year if you're trying to like set a goal for yourself in terms of like why, you know, I'm struggling to finish something. But like retro games, indie, like a lot of some of the shorter indie games as of late are good ways to kind of like reach a goal in terms of like if you feel like you're not accomplishing something, or if you set a goal for yourself, like, you know, I haven't finished something in a while, like I want to finish a bunch of games, just pick a bunch of retro games or check out some shorter indie games. And like if I've found if you do kind of what I've been doing, like actually writing down and keeping track of what you play throughout the year, like you'll be surprised how much you actually probably play. Unless you're just playing like one MMO all the time forever, then you don't really need to think about like, what did I do all this year? So long story short, this games like this, like these Turtles Game Boy games on this Cowabunga collection are like partially the reason why I make my goal for the years, because like you can finish them in a sitting in like an hour. So yeah, I finished the game in less than an hour, and I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of the collection soon. How did the music stop? We got to the end of the playlist. What's the face for, Gemini? Oh, I just read your response. I didn't mean to. I don't even know what you've been playing. I'm assuming I do know you play Final Fantasy 14. Yeah, I didn't mean to like call out anyone specific, because I play Destiny 2 still, and that fucks up my like progress for anything else during the year. Yeah, I just meant generally speaking, like ever since I started keeping track of what I play during the year, um, uh, A, I finish more, and B, like I just it keeps me like kind of focused and on track. um what was I gonna say? I was gonna follow up with something that now I lost my train of thought. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Like, it seems like a lot of whenever I see people kind of talk about like what they've been playing, everyone always kind of like, uh, I always see people generally like kind of sharing their thoughts on like what they played throughout the year, and I always see so many people write like, "Oh, I have no idea what I played this year," or like, "I don't even know what I did 3 months ago," and I'm like, start writing that stuff down, and you'll see. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Gemini. All right. And I'm sure you have like a lot of your own personal kind of gaming goals with if you're playing like an MMO like 14 or Destiny or like World of Warcraft or whatever. Like, I mean, those games have like, hundreds of, you know, things to accomplish within them. So like that's like a full commitment. Oh, cool. Warframe on the plane. Oh, War Groove. I was about to say like Warframe's online. Like, did you have to get like the plane's Wi-Fi access to play like an MMO on the plane? I've been traveling a lot too lately, and I've been trying to figure out like what uh what games suit like traveling the best. Wargroove's good though, because that's like a top-down strategy RPG kind of, right? I think. Yeah. All right, so let's round this out. Game 45 was Tinykin. This is the 45th game I finished. Developed by Splash Team, which I didn't know about. This is of Splasher fame, which is an awesome 2D platformer, by the way. Is a classic 3D platformer that feels straight out of the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era. While Tinykin shares some similarities to Pikmin, it's more rooted in traditional collectathons like Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter. In Tinykin, you play as a space traveler of sorts who lands on an alien planet that seemingly looks like someone's house from Earth. On this planet, you discover Pikmin-like creatures that can be used to traverse the environment. Each each Tinykin type grants player new abilities. Red Tinykin are used to destroy objects, and green Tinykin can build ladders to reach new heights, for example. The game's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids approach lends itself to tucked away secrets and collectibles in nearly every nook and cranny of the house. Pollen-like golden nuggets are scattered everywhere, and you can trade them for upgrades to your hover ability, which allows you to complete certain objectives and you couldn't do otherwise. You also obtain a bar of soap early on in the game so that you can freely skate around the environments. Yeah, Tinykin is one of my favorite games of the year, easily. I do have one hang up with it that I'm about to get to, but I did let's go back to kind of showing you some behind the scenes on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe to my channel. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? Don't do anything you don't want to do. They're just stream up dumps of my my stream art. It's like a or video archive or a dump of my stream. Where the hell did I play with my stupid thumbnails? Okay, let me get back to that. Tinykin has a ton of world building and dialogue, although you don't really have to engage with any of it to make progress. The game takes place in a human-sized house filled with insects and creatures that have made their home within the confines of its walls. Each area of the house is run by a tribe of insects with their own cultures and philosophies. Most of it is fairly well written, but sometimes there's just a bit too much of it considering it's a 3D platformer. At its core, I struggled to not skip the text because I just wanted to jump around, explore, and collect things. The ending sequence reveals a somewhat interesting twist, but it didn't feel earned. It sort of went in one ear and out the other for me. Yeah, I don't know what it was about it, but like, I just wasn't like into Pikmin. Has the comparisons to Pikmin, first of all, are not really like appropriate because it's not really like Pikmin. It's so surface level Pikmin. It's more of just, it's a straight up 3D platformer with like objective based goals. But what the hell was I gonna say? Oh, the story is, that's the thing that like, the story is very Pikmin-ish in terms of like, you're a space traveler and you get kind of a I don't really remember what happens. There's like a distress signal or something happens where you end up on this planet or this location where you kind of crash land and you have to kind of build something, like you rebuild the ship in the first Pikmin game to get off the planet. So it's the same kind of concept as Pikmin, but that's kind of where the comparison ends. Tinykin is one of the most immediately satisfying games I've played all year. It's a constant stream of dopamine, particularly for completionists or for those who simply enjoy collecting stuff. It's extremely hard to put down. This is one of the few games where like I actually didn't jump around a lot. I just was like, fuck it, I need to finish this. It has the satisfaction you get for delivering items to your ship in Pikmin, but without all of the micromanaging strategy and stress that comes with it. I completed the game at 100%, but I missed an achievement I can no longer earn unless I delete my current save, as there's only one save slot. There's an achievement for collecting all of, this is more nitty gritty stuff. Achievement for collecting all of the Tinykin in the game. Tinykin are housed in egg-like cocoons scattered around the stages. There are a finite amount of Tinykin to collect in the game. However, if you don't toss a Tinykin at one of these egg-like cocoons, you will miss the sniper achievement if you've already hatched them all by normal means, which is usually accomplished by just running into them. Other than an unmissable achievement and a story that doesn't quite stick its landing, Tinykin is nearly a perfect game that accomplishes what it sets out to do. I can't wait to see what this developer does next, because in my books, they're 2 for 2 so far. Yeah, this developer, I didn't even realize until I did a little research, because their developer's name didn't really stick with me, but they did this 2D platformer that came out a couple years ago called Splasher. And I should have wrote about this because they've made 2 games. One was like a straight up 2D platformer. It was very like Rayman Legends-esque. And then they go from a 2D game to like a really well done, well realized 3D game. So they're super talented for whatever the size of their studio is. Like there's so many indie developers I've seen lately that have jumped from 2D to 3D. And it's super impressive that they can do that with kind of, I mean, I don't know how hard it was to make it, but with what seems like pretty clear, like, you know, pretty ease. So here's some of my footage from my playthrough. Of my Inception setup here. And thanks for already being a subscriber, Gemini. Yeah, like it. So there are Pikmin that can pick up and carry things, but in Pikmin you have to kind of manually control them, or they will start automatically moving back towards the ship in Pikmin. And this game has something similar where there's like these pink Tinykin that can be used to pick up certain objects, like that boat, for example, back there in the footage here. Do I have enough for it now? This is actually good timing if I do. No, I don't. So whenever I was recording this, I didn't. But it's all like automated, like even more so than Pikmin. So it's not, and you're not kind of splitting up your resources. Like, all right, I'm gonna pick up this ship piece, but then I'm gonna go attack these enemies. There's no enemies in this game, first of all. So like the Pikmin comparisons are like super kind of shallow. But I understand why people kind of made that comparison out of the gate. It's more of just like a 3D. It's straight up a 3D platformer, and the Tinykin kind of like they're like your abilities. They're your kind of traversal abilities. But it's just so fucking fun and relaxing and easy to play. It's so chill. It's just constant kind of like you're always collecting something, you're always doing something. So here's an example in this footage here. See how there's like this like kind of arrow line of sight where the item that you're picking up is being taken. You don't have to think about anything. It just automatically happens. And there's some kind of manipulation you have to do in the stages to kind of get one item to the next spot, but it's not like there's no threat of anything. There's no day and night cycle. There's no enemies that can like eat your Tinykin or anything like that. So still cool though. It's still really it's one of my favorite games of the year easily. Yeah, the stack up's really it's super the whole game's super satisfying. All right, this is the last game for the third quarter. I played another Turtles game, the Back from the Sewers. Uh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Back from the Sewers, again from the Cowabunga collection, developed by Konami. It's a better and more ambitious game than the original Game Boy release. Similar to Fall of the Foot Clan, there are 6 stages instead of 5, and they're split into sub-levels which culminate in a usually frustrating boss encounter. You can still pick between the 4 turtles, but you can't do the stages out of order like in the first game. The sprites are much larger and the background art is more detailed naturally, considering it's a sequel. The levels are much more interesting to traverse as well and have some much needed verticality. It feels like a sequel, all things considered. I once again completed Back from the Sewers without any save states or rewinds, but I nearly caved during a particular level. This is one of the worst levels I experienced all year. There's a stage that takes place in the sky, and if you're familiar with with most Zelda games, it's a Lost Woods type of level. If you don't traverse the stage in a particular order, you'll loop back around to the start of the level. The problem, however, is that there are literally no visual hints, so good luck guessing your way through. Final stage is relatively difficult too and acts as sort of a boss rush. Even though Back from the Sewers is technically a better game, I think I might prefer the simplicity of Fall of the Foot Clan. I finished the game in about an hour or two, and I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of the collection soon. So that was the last game I played for the third quarter of the year. So as I said, as of writing this, that was game number 46 of 2022. I've already met my goal for 52 games this year. I will have hopefully we'll have a Q4 blog post and stream similar to this for the end of the year. So it'll either be, well, it'll have to be because I'm going to be traveling again. It'll have to be beginning of the new year. So the next time I do a stream like this will be probably like January 1st or 2nd, if I even have my writing done by then. And then I'm going to do my game of the year wrap up as well, which I think I'm doing a top 20 games of 2022. So yeah, just to summarize, the games I finished Q3 2022 from July, August, and September was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Back from the Sewers, Tinykin, TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan, Elden Ring, Froggun or Froggun? I don't know how to say it. Wave Race 64, Ice Age Scrat's Nutty Adventure, Destroy All Humans, the PS2 version on PS4 specifically, Time on Frog Island, Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 2 Bush Rescue, Bright Memory Infinite, Hell Pie, the original Ape Escape on PS5, PS4, PS5 technically, Stray, which is also one of my games of the year, Klonoa, Door to Phantomile, from the new Fantasy Reverie series collection, which will probably make my top 20 this year, even if it's an older game. I think I just have to include it. Pocky and Rocky Reshrine. Let me see. Ease 9 Monstrum Nox, which is my, earlier I said this is my favorite game that I played in 2022 that did not release in 2022. That's a very specific award that I gave it. It's basically my late to the party for 2022. Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, and a replay of ElecHead, which again, I played this last year. This was a replay on Switch, and I finally got 100% just to sum this up. And it came out this year on Switch for the first time, but it technically was a 2021 game, and it made my top 10 last year, so I will not include this on my top 20 this year. Yeah, that's what I've been playing for the third quarter of 2022. Yeah, I always have to give, so whenever I do my game of the year write-up, I do kind of like, it's usually top 10 with some honorable mentions, and then there's a whole post I do of like the things that kind of fell by the wayside. So it's like games that like I maybe started but couldn't finish. There's games that I played for the first time and finished in the current year but didn't come out in the current year, because I try to keep my top 20 to like things that, or top 10 rather, to games that specifically release in the year that I'm writing about, or that in the year that they released. Because I think it's more fun that way, instead of including games that were from, you know, they can still be important and impactful, and they could be your personal game of the year, but I personally like to like talk about the games released like for that year. Anyway. But yeah, if you want to read more of my posts or my writing, the link to my WordPress blog is on the main page of my Twitch channel. Same with my YouTube, which is again just more or less like slightly edited archives of my Twitch streams. So this will go up on my YouTube channel for anyone to watch after the fact. So that's everything that I have had planned for today. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I think I'll just close the stream out. So I'm not gonna bother rating anyone today. All right, so I will talk to you all soon, and I will be back with a similar stream like this towards the beginning of the new year. So I'm going to try to wrap up whatever I've been playing for the fourth quarter of the year, which is these next 3 months, or including October, obviously. And then there will be a game of the year discussion and stream. Probably early to mid-January is when I find time to do that, right before work gets kind of crazy again. So yeah, thanks for having out everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye.